Hello, it is 15th of July 2017. The time is just gone 2:30 in the afternoon, and this little video is a little bit of an insight into how I do some of my preparation and study for projects. Now, right off the cuff, my target audience with this is not the main detractors to, or the main participants in this discussion on this particular topic. So this won't be of interest to a Joe Sonseed. This won't be of interest to a Fox in the Know. And it's not aimed at them. It's rather aimed at more serious participants in the great debate um, who are philosophically inclined and are trying to get to the truth of the matter rather than grab an argument and run with it and over-exaggerate its implications as Joe Sonseed does, or other people like Fox and the Know who are just about showboating and trying to point score. So the objective here is to explain to other persons, apart from that, who might be interested in philosophical arguments and reasoning and study methods and particularly Callum cosmological argument, the kind of methodology that I'm applying to this particular paper by Stephen Puryear, Professor Stephen Puryear, um, with the Callum cosmological argument, the primary support, according to its greatest proponent and defender, at least until it stopped being a research program for him, William Lane Craig, has said it's the philosophical support. So for premise 2, there are 4 lines of support given by him, 2 philosophical, 2 scientific, but the primary support is philosophical from his point of view. Whether you agree with that, that's his view. Stephen Puryear has produced a paper, Finitism and the Beginning of the Universe, shortened FBU, and that's basically undercutting that philosophical support. Not really because of anything that's said in there in the argument, but because of another view that Craig had to respond to objections to the argument in there. So the paper's out there. I recommend reading it. It's a good paper. There have been 2 responses from philosophers. A guy called, I think it's a Professor Doomsday and a Professor Locke. I think they're associate professors of philosophy, but I don't have their stuff up just now, but from memory. And they've made responses to this paper. William Lane Craig has not as yet made response to this paper. And then Stephen Puryear has made a response to Doomsday and Locke. So up to now, he's had the final say. He's started it off, 2 responses, he's responded. That doesn't prove anything in and of itself, but you would think that if Doomsday and Locke, if they'll be aware of Puryear's response, and they either give up the ghost and say, oh, okay, so, or they would come back with something, or they just think, okay, he's made his case, we've made our case, no further to go on that. It's frustratingly can happen. Now, how do you go about studying a subject like that? Like Puryear's paper, it's in fact philosophical papers, there tends to be a lot of jargon in it, philosophical jargon. You're talking about 4 philosophical papers. So you can read Poorier's paper, maybe even study it. You can then look at Doomsday's paper, do the same, then Locke's, then back to Poorier. That's one way. But for me, I like a method where I can really get into the argument so I can understand it in some sort of depth and also see how they interact with each other. So that's the methodology that you're looking at just now on my screen. And I started this years ago when I had the idea that what I was going to do as a major project is take like the first presentation of the Callum cosmological argument by Craig, do this keyword construction, and then add on other papers and from other people on the same subject. But really speaking, the project was so massive it just became unworkable. But the general idea is what you do is, like you can see here, you take Poorier's paper and you do it basically paragraph by paragraph. You break it into keywords in those paragraphs, so you don't include other words like off and the and things like that. So keywords that might have bearing on the actual argument, and you just start collating. So if you look at this first one here in the abstract, I'll highlight it so people can see what I'm talking about. So this here, this is the abstract from that paper. And what you do is, like, if I was running through that from scratch, the word many would not be a keyword, but the word philosophers would. So that would be my first word I would put in, and I wouldn't just put in philosophers, but all derivatives of that, like philosophy, philosophical, philosophers, any kind of derivatives, and you put those into one word, like you see I've done with the word actual and actually there. And you just go, okay, so philosophers, then argue, then past, then finite, then duration, maybe reaching, present, moment, involved, something, impossible, sequential, occurrent, and you just keep going through that. And every single word gets its own part. So actually, you can see here actually, so at the time we're speaking, I'm at paragraph 4, and you can see this is all the mentions up to paragraph 4 where the word actual or actually occurs. This first one here in the abstract, and it then pops up in paragraph 2, and twice in paragraph 2 actually. There you go, I used the word actually, that was unintentional. Also pops up in paragraph 4 in the argument, and it pops up in a footnote. So these are all FBUs, and so you do that for every word in there, and what you end up with, I mean, it's not complete obviously, but you know, you just the other good thing is it introduces you to other players in the game who have written on the same subject, like Al-Ghazali, Al-Kindi, Aquinas is mentioned, Aristotle's mentioned, Kant's mentioned, Withrow, all of these people are mentioned in here. There's even a Bell in there, which is good. So you just work through all the different words, and your idea is you're going to work through the whole of the paper by Poorier. And then when you've done that key construction, keyword construction of Poorier's paper, which is represented here, then what will happen is below that you then add in Doomsday's paper, or the first response to it, whether it's Doomsday or Locke, I can't recall. And then to this here, you do the same. You do the same keyword construction on Doomsday or Locke's paper, but it's not called FBU, it's whatever their title is, or an abbreviation on there. and you add all the keywords there. Now what that will give you is a lot of duplication. So they'll be the same words, keywords will be mentioned by all three of them, but there might be some unique words that are only used by one or two, and that's interesting to note, where only an author and only that author uses that particular keyword or key name. That's something to follow through on. So you would put like, let's say we did Loki here. So you'll have Loki, and then you'll have Doomsday here, and you'll end up with the three of them in there. And as well as that, there's another guy I might include, but I don't think he's really a series puts me on more like a review, but I might include that. But however many it is, you exhaust the responses that you have available to you, and then when all that's completed, you can just you can just say, okay, so I've done all that work, and now I have a keyword breakdown. Then you can say, okay, so if I wanted to know, for example, what the argument is, then I can go to the word argument and all its derivatives. So here we have argue and mentioned, and even in the abstract, obviously in the abstract you get a good idea, so you get a good overview there of what the situation's about, bit of a history of it, and you get the actual argument. There it is in logical form here, and then of course premise specific information on premise 2, and you've got instant access to. When it's completed, you won't just have instant access to everything Puryear has said about arguing and argumentation in that argument, but you'll also have what Loki has said and Doomsday has said, and that's the kind of general idea of how you do it. And you can then start making comparisons and looking at, okay, so now I understand how Puryear's argument is. Now I understand what Loki's response is Loki's, and I also know Puryear's response to that. I have it all in there, which is most successful, and then you can do the same with Doomsday. And that's basically the methodology that's been used to understand this paper, or papers in plural. And once you understand all that, then that's it. That's at that point you can start doing a breakdown of everything. You can see the Great William Lane Craig mentioned there, the column. So that's just a brief overview of the kind of methodology that I like to apply to this kind of stuff. If you have I'm not recommending it. I'm not suggesting it for anyone else. I'm just giving an insight into how I do it, and hence the reason why it can be a fairly lengthy process before I feel confident. Okay, I got a real good thorough understanding of this argument. Given I have that, I can make an informed decision in regards to whether Puryear's initial paper is successful, or whether it's defeated by Loki's paper or Doomsday's paper. And you would then revise your view, if required, on the philosophical support for premise 2. Provisionally, of course, because obviously William Lane Craig hasn't contributed to it yet. Whether he will or not is doubtful, because the column's not an active research programme for him at the present time. So I'm not expecting to see a paper coming from Craig in response to Puryear, which is regrettable. I have tried to contact Craig through Reasonable Faith question and answers, question of the week, to raise this objection. Suggested that even if it doesn't become question of the week, maybe he could give a private response, but I'm not really optimistic that response is going to come from there. But anyway, that's a little bit of an insight into how I'm going about this particular project. And I hope at least someone finds that to be an interesting way to be doing stuff. But if not, well, at least you know how I'm doing stuff, and why it can take a long while for me to um, make specific responses to arguments or papers. Like if you think about, I'm not sure. I give a couple of examples very briefly. Like I remember Ozymandias bringing up objection to the Callum on something from nothing. And I think I took about a year before I came back to him on that with now 7, maybe 8 with the Grim Reaper paradox. Yeah, maybe 7 or 8 arguments against an acausal universe over a causal universe. So basically arguing that, hey, okay, yep, so an acausal universe is possible, logically possible, but here's the reasons why you shouldn't think it's metaphysically more probable in this case than not. 7, 8 arguments given towards that would all need to be flawed or deficient in some way in order for an acausal universe to stand up to investigation with I think very few arguments for an acausal universe apart from logically possible. And as soon as you move to metaphysical possibility over logical possibility, the logical possibility that's no longer in play, and that's been conceded. Logically possible, but we're looking at metaphysically possible, that it could more probably be the case in the real world. And as far as I know, 8 arguments for, no arguments. 8 arguments for a causal universe and no arguments against it for metaphysical possibility. So that took over a year. Another example would be the interpretation argument, now dead in the water argument, as far as I'm concerned. The Pal Talkers, Joe Sonseed, pushing it more cautiously and with a better kind of methodology, I think, or a better approach to it was Cliff Stamp, and pushing that idea on us. And again, maybe took me, I think, maybe 7 or 8 months to think through that argument and start to come up with the death of it, the defeaters to it, which would be the prima facie case against it, which would be the argument from independent means to derive the intentions of God, as well as his existence, of course. And the reliance of the argument on a high view of inspiration. So at least 3 or 4 arguments there is against the argument from inductive experience, in common with inductive experience of any other being that we might meet. So at least 4 arguments there that, as far as I'm concerned, have put a coffin in the interpretation argument. But again, it took a long time. So the kind of message is that, I might take a while to respond to an argument or a paper or something, but that's because I'm working on that if it's a subject of interest to me. I'm interested in Puryear's objection to premise 2 of the Callum. Not only would it be a relatively serious blow to the Craig's version of the Callum, you would basically have to remove those 2 philosophical lines of evidence. But you want to know whether a line of support is good or bad. Now, it's not the death of the Callum as Sonseed would predict, because with those 2 philosophical arguments, even if you took them out, you still have the 2 scientific evidences, and as well as that, you could replace those 2 philosophical arguments with another 1 or 2 philosophical arguments for the Puryear himself has suggested. One way that could be done would be if a person believed that time was discrete and you couldn't traverse an actual infinite, then that would be further support for premise 2. That's from Puryear himself. And another one would be any other argument to the impossibility of an infinite past. philosophically argument, and that would be something like the Grim Reaper paradox by Alexander Proust, and then taken up by Robert Koons. So those, so the Callum's still in good standing as far as I'm concerned, because you've got one of two situations. If Puryear's paper was successful, you would remove two failed philosophical arguments in support of premise 2, but you would replace those two failed ones with two new ones that aren't open to Puryear's objection. So you would have strengthened the Callum cosmological argument in light of Puryear's paper and objections. But the other scenario would be if Puryear's paper fails, then the two philosophical arguments would remain, but you would also add in two others. So you would end up with 4 philosophical lines of argument in support of premise 2, plus the 2 scientific evidences. So whether Puryear's paper is successful or not, I don't think it's significant only to Craig's version and those 2 arguments there, and even that not necessarily, but it's certainly not the death blow to the Callum. And Puryear takes that view. He doesn't think he's defeated the argument. He said that specifically. So if you hear that by anyone like Joe Sonseed, you just ignore that. That's not Stephen Puryear's view on that there. But not the death of the Callum, but still a very interesting paper by Puryear, and very, very good objections, possibly to the philosophical support for premise 2. So that's the reason why it takes so long. That's a bit of an insight into my methodology. If you were completely bored with this, there's no help for you. If you loved it, well done. And I'll close it off there. And thanks for your time.